Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And to help preview the third Saturday in October, I have Tony Tsoukalas of Tide Illustrated, Alabama site on the Rivals Network, here to join us to help get an insight on the Crimson Tide perspective of this matchup. First of all, Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for this one. I've been kind of looking forward to this one for a while. The last time we traveled up to Knoxville, it was a pretty exciting game. So I've been kind of looking forward to seeing that again.
I think this one's been circled on both sides since that 2022 game, just seeing how the dynamic will play out with Alabama returning for the first time. Then, of course, the coaching change with Nick Saban retiring, Kalen DeBoer taking over. I think a lot of Tennessee fans were probably pretty excited to hear that news and welcome the new coaching staff into Knoxville. We'll start there. We're, 7 weeks into the season. What are the thoughts around DeBoer at this point around the fan base? Obviously, a really nice start and probably pretty high thoughts after the Georgia game. And then the last 2 weeks, very similar to Tennessee's. Kind of where's the fan base at with Kalen DeBoer right now?
Yeah, I mean, he's winless against teams from Tennessee. So that might be a positive for the Vols coming forward. But I think that Vanderbilt loss has really rubbed the fan base the wrong way. It's almost kind of taken away the Georgia win. And I think it's almost magnified the second half of that Georgia game, which was almost felt like a loss. So it's like you have like half of a Georgia win that the fans were really excited about, and then you almost threw that away. You lose at Vanderbilt, which is like nobody for $1 million. I would have never guessed that would have been the first loss in the DeBoer era. And then everyone kind of thought that they were going to have a get-right game against South Carolina, and they didn't. In fact, they tried really hard to throw that one away. It's kind of like you said, the situation that Tennessee's in. You had what you thought was a pretty good performance against Oklahoma, and then you lose to Arkansas. You look bad against Florida. It's the same, pretty much the same story. Obviously the win against Georgia is going to get Alabama a little bit more credit than the win against Oklahoma is going to get Tennessee. But yeah, I think both fan bases are in the same kind of situation where they I think there's still a thought that, hey, this team could be good, this team could definitely be a playoff team, but at the same time you're like, man, we've just proven that we could lose to anyone as well. So it's kind of like this could be a huge game for both teams in terms of sending it into either sending its season into the right direction or maybe potentially sending it into a tailspin.
Isn't that funny how right after that Georgia game, I think a lot of people were like, all right, well, game day's obviously going to Knoxville. It's going to be two undefeated teams. It's going to be who knows? It could be the number 1 versus number 2 team in the country at that point. And then just 2 weeks later, we're sitting here and it's like, loser of this game is in a really tough spot to make the playoffs. Because at that point, your margin for error is probably completely gone. I mean, 10-2 gets you in, but 9-3, I kind of can't imagine that gets you one of those top 11 spots with the auto bid. But
it's tough. I think at that point you're just gonna have to really hope on results. I mean, 12 teams is such a lot. It's such a big number that maybe if Tennessee has 3 losses and one of them's and it has a win over Georgia, maybe then you're starting to think, okay, maybe. But at that point, Georgia would then be a 2-loss team. So you're just kind of like hoping on results at that point.
Yeah. Everything's out in front of both teams, but I think a lot of it starts this Saturday. Going back to Kalen DeBoer, though, can you feel a difference in this program? Like how different is the Kalen DeBoer kind of staff and what they're doing in Tuscaloosa compared to the last 2 decades with Nick Saban?
Oh, things are just fresher and they're nicer, to be honest with you, just from a media standpoint. But I'm sure it kind of like seeps into the team a little bit. I mean, it's telling that we haven't had a rant from Kalen DeBoer. I mean, we would have definitely had a rant from Nick Saban. Maybe not even after the Vanderbilt game, because a lot of times, Nick Saban didn't give rants after losses, but we definitely would have had one after that South Carolina game. It's just we're not going to get that with Kalen DeBoer. That's not his style, and he is frustrated with the way his team's performing, but he's just not somebody that's going to go fire and brimstone and just kind of rain down on the media. I think that it's a little bit more accepting with his players too. I kind of feel that Malachi Moore might have been punished a little bit differently for what he did at the end of the Vanderbilt game than what Kalen DeBoer punished him, but it seemed to work out. You know what I mean? So, you just got to give this coaching staff the benefit of the doubt. I believe in what Kalen DeBoer is doing at Alabama. I think he's a really good coach. There are going to be some growing pains. I think there's a lot more parity in college football, and you're kind of seeing that. That being said, I don't think there's any excuse for the way Alabama performs on third down, or really losing to a Vanderbilt team that they just totally outclassed in terms of talent. I'm not trying to necessarily make up for excuse the performances that Alabama's had, but there is more parity in college football. I think you can say the same thing with Arkansas and Tennessee. I mean, these losses that you're just like, oh, how the heck did they lose with all this talent? Like, there's a lot more, things are a lot more even now with the transfer portal, and you can answer needs. And so, as far as things are different, I mean, they are, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think kind of Kalen DeBoer is a more modern coach, and I think kind of Alabama needed that. I mean, not to say that like getting rid of Nick Saban's a good thing, but eventually you are going to have to move on. So you're going to have to kind of pull off that Band-Aid at one point, and Alabama did it, and they're still 5-1. Everyone thought that Alabama was going to be 5-1 heading into the Tennessee game anyways. They just thought that they were going to have lost to Georgia and not Vanderbilt. But, so I mean, like, this is where Alabama thought it was. It has a 3-game stretch against Tennessee, Missouri, and LSU, and that will decide the playoff.
That's a funny way to look at it, because I think if you told Tennessee fans going into the season, hey, UT is going to be 5-1 headed to Bama, or with Bama coming to town, I think a lot of them would go, okay, that's fine. You lose a game on the road to Oklahoma, they're probably a pretty decent team, whatever. But just the way that it's transpired, maybe there's a lot more kind of pessimism around what the programs are doing, just because of the way they've looked the last 2 weeks. Jalen Milroe, to me, after that Georgia game, it was like, all right, he won the Heisman. Like give him the award already. That's kind of what it felt like. And then obviously team results matter, and that kind of weighs into things. And he's kind of taken a solid step back in that race. How has he been the last 2 weeks particularly, and then just overall this season? What are your thoughts on him?
He definitely didn't perform well against South Carolina. He made a few mistakes. I mean, his numbers weren't necessarily terrible, but he had those 2 interceptions. He missed on a couple throws. He made bad decisions really for the first time in the season. The interception he had against Vanderbilt was kind of a fluky play where the ball gets tipped up, and should he have thrown into coverage like that? No, but most of the time you get punished by an incomplete pass in that situation. And he just had a fluky thing where I think it hit the guy's helmet or something, and it ended up in a pick 6. Against South Carolina, he made some bad decisions, just some dumb, held on to the ball too long, which resulted in a safety, threw a pick that just was inexplainable before the half. So that was a little bit concerning. I think too, when you look at it, I'm not taking anything away from Georgia because they have a great defense, but they were a little bit banged up. I think this South Carolina front 7 was the hardest front 7 Alabama's faced this year, just based on it's a very talented group. And then B, Georgia was a little bit banged up. So I think it's the biggest test that Milroe has faced in terms of pressure. I don't think he necessarily passed it. He did kind of rally back and lead him to a touchdown at the end with that touchdown pass to Jeremy Bernard. So got to give him credit for that. But this offense, is where it is what Jalen Milroe makes it. I mean, it's very reliant on him. He's their best runner. He's their best passer. Fortunately for Alabama, he's just really hard to stop. If he has a game like the one he did against South Carolina, I think they lose a lot of these big games. Like if he plays like that against an equally good front 7 in Tennessee, I think they're going to lose. You just can't make those kind of mistakes. But on the flip side, if he plays like he did against Georgia, I don't think there's anybody in the nation that can beat him. So it's kind of weird. This team's heavily reliant on him. It's almost like an addiction or something. Like you can't take it away from Alabama anymore because they're so reliant, So you kind of just are where you are, and they are the Jalen Milroe show on offense.
Well, around him, the guy that everyone's talking about, rightfully, Ryan Williams, the whole he's only 17. That's kind of become its own little joke because of how often he's talked about. But
I haven't heard it.
Who else is there around Jalen Milroe? Skill positions? How's the offensive line been? Just kind of what are the pieces around him performing like to this point?
Yeah, the other receiver that's really kind of standing out is Jeremy Bernard, the Washington transfer. He's the one that caught I guess you would call it the game-winning touchdown. Put Alabama up by 8 against South Carolina. He's really good. He's a talented guy. He's who, before we always kind of knew that Ryan Williams was going to break out, but we figured it wouldn't be just as a freshman, it wouldn't be this, intense. And so I think a lot of people figured that Jeremy Bernard was going to be the leading receiver. So he's a really good number 2 guy. Alabama has 2 really good backs in Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. They just really haven't used them because Jalen Milroe's eaten up some of those carries. And I think that kind of creates its own little conflict because they haven't really been as dominant on the ground outside of Milroe, because I think, as a running back, you need some of those carries to kind of build up and kind of get the motor running a little bit. And that's been a kind of a challenge the past couple of weeks of getting them the necessary carries. You look at the offensive line, it's been kind of hit or miss. On paper, they have probably the best interior offensive line in the nation, or they should. You got Tyler Booker, Parker Brailsford from Washington, and then Jaden Roberts. I mean, that's a really good interior offensive line. Hasn't necessarily performed like everyone thought it would be. I don't think Alabama's really like bullied teams inside the way that you'd think that they could. And then on the tackle positions, I mean, you have Caden Proctor, who's played a lot better in his second season than he did as a freshman last year. And then Elijah Pritchett, who's kind of coming into his own, but still a little bit hit or miss. I would just say the offensive line's hit or miss. Sometimes it's pretty good. Sometimes it's not. I do expect Tennessee to get some pressure just because Tennessee is really good up front. And, I don't think Alabama's spectacular yet as an offensive line, but I don't think it's just going to be a pushover offensive line. I think that they will challenge Tennessee on the other end. I just expect, maybe Tennessee wins, 6 out of 10 battles or 7 out of 10 battles, instead of, they're not just going to walk through it.
An offensive line that is struggling right now is Tennessee's. If we flip to the other side of the ball, how's Alabama's pass rush been? Is this a group that's getting home with just 4 rushers? And is that something that you're looking for this Saturday? Like, is this a defensive line for Alabama that could really take advantage of a struggling Tennessee offensive line?
I think maybe that like it's weird. Is it third down? Because if not on third down, I don't think they can. Because whatever happens on third down, Alabama just doesn't have that killer instinct. I mean, they can get to the quarterback. They sacked Lenore Sellers 4 times last game. They created turnovers. They pressured him, and then on third down, something would happen, and they wouldn't, they'd get a chip block from a running back and give Sellers an extra 2 seconds, and then the secondary would just forget where they are, and then they'd complete a pass. And I could totally see that happening again with Tennessee. I could also see guys like, Key Robinson, LT Overton getting home and sacking Nico, and I already forgot how to say his last name. Dang it.
Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. I just needed to say it one time. Just like
you have to like say it in the mirror.
No disrespect to him at all either. I think he's a great quarterback. I know he's not really playing up to his 5-star level, but I think, I think he has the opportunity to hurt Alabama's secondary if, especially if he can convert on those third downs. That's going to be something to watch just because I think it's just going to be so hard. Alabama's just struggled so much on it. And, they've proven that they can get to the passer, but not consistently, I guess, enough on third down or something will happen. I mean, it just seems like it's comical almost. I mean, they've got 2 of the last 2 games, they've gotten penalties on third and longs where they've gotten stops and where, the defender had his hand up and just barely touched the quarterback's head. But that's that's a penalty now. It's coming down on the quarterback's head. And so like things like that, you got to learn off of those mistakes. And it just doesn't seem like Alabama's doing that. So I could definitely see that being a problem, but they do have the pressure to get in the backfield, just maybe not on a, I don't know if it'll be on a consistent enough basis, to be honest.
It's funny that you mentioned about third downs, because I think that's what Tennessee's strength on defense has really been this year is they get in these third and short, fourth and short situations, and all of a sudden it's like they're taking another step. And that is what kind of makes great defenses great, is you get yourself an opportunities to get off the field and you take advantage of that. You don't let your opponent kind of stay on the field on those third and longs, third and mediums, third and shorts. But what's been the issue? Like, if you had to pick one thing, where is Alabama's biggest weakness? Maybe you just that, but like, is it this? Our team thinking
the secondary? Yeah, it's got to be the secondary. You got a freshman cornerback who's been hit or miss, and you've seen some breakdowns in coverage. Whether it's actually really whether it's the secondary or the linebackers failing to pick up stuff. You've had some breakdowns in coverage. I think that's been, and then while Alabama has the pass rushers to make a difference, they don't have like that Will Anderson or that James Pierce Jr., that guy. I think that's just like, okay, he's on the field. He'll get us off the field, and they've got guys that could develop into that. I just, I like LT Overton is a guy that I think shows a lot of promise and he could like develop into that. He's not there yet though. He's not a guy that like, okay, LT Overton's on the field, Alabama's going to be fine, So I think that's that killer instinct on third down or having that guy that, can just end things. They don't necessarily have that. And then, yeah, just inexperience, lack of discipline in coverage, whether it's, the linebackers are sometimes as young, secondary. I wonder too, sometimes how much they're trying to focus on this new defense and get everything perfect. And then I wonder how much that's preventing them from just kind of going out and playing a little bit. Cause you see them, they have the opportunity to stop. I think maybe sometimes they just get in their own heads a little bit. And that's going to be another issue too, when you think about it. I guess it's not going to be necessarily loud on defense because obviously Vols fans are not going to be wanting to make a lot of noise for the offense, but still that environment, that energy, it's going to make things maybe even more intimidating. So if you're in your own head at all, this is the kind of venue that could really maybe bring the worst out of you. So I think some of those issues are just going to have to be fixed this week and fixed fast,
Kind of on that note, Alabama's really only played one true road game. I mean, you lose to Vanderbilt on the road, but it's probably 80% Alabama fans there.
No, like more probably, yeah.
Vanderbilt, it's an asterisk on the road record for those. But Alabama did go into Wisconsin, and they dominated Wisconsin, and that's an environment that can get up there. So is it fair to say that this team's handled road environments well? I know it's a small sample size, but like, how much of a concern is it that this team's going into a place that's going to be pretty fired up?
I think, the key to that Wisconsin game was the fact that they just jumped on Wisconsin early. I think that's more the case is like this team has kind of played up to its competition or down to its competition. So from an, I guess an optimistic Alabama angle, you would say there's no way that this team's going to take Tennessee lightly. They're going to be jazzed. They're going to feed off of the environment there and that they'll probably come out hot. One would think. I've kind of learned not to assume anything this season, but I don't know if it's necessarily this team's good on the road. This team's good when it's when things matter or when they're fully focused, and then they should be fully focused for this one. I just I don't see how you wouldn't be. It's a rivalry game on the road. You just the people that are coming back from 2 years ago know what it feels like to lose and to snap a winning streak. I can't imagine why you wouldn't be up for this game.
Well, how's this one going to play out? Do you think Alabama's got the edge? And then what's interesting to me is that over under for the point total came out 55.5, which is really funny because last time they met Neyland Stadium, Tennessee scored 52 by themselves, but both offenses not necessarily kind of firing on all cylinders right now. How do you see this one playing out in Neyland?
It's tough. I mean, I can't believe I'm like maybe shifting, especially with how bad Alabama's played. But like from the start, I've always penciled Tennessee as the game Alabama was going to lose. I really liked what I saw from the Vols. I knew it was going to be a tough road trip. It was going to be their first real tough road trip because I never really bought into the hype with Wisconsin. I thought, Alabama was going to be like 10-2 with probably or maybe 11-1. And I thought the Georgia game was a maybe. And I just was penciling this one as like, I'm going to keep this as a loss. Now I think I'm slightly shading towards Alabama just because I don't know. I just feel like this team's not as bad as it's been playing. And I think that Tennessee I don't think Tennessee's offense is as electric as I thought they were going to be. And I like, while they can hit Alabama, I don't know if they're going to as much. I kind of like the playmaking ability of Jalen Milroe. If you get into a game where you need to do that at the end, I kind of like having him. But it's close, man. I could, I go back and forth. I would not be shocked if I really wouldn't be shocked at anything. I wouldn't be shocked if Tennessee comes out and just blows the doors off Alabama. I wouldn't be shocked if Alabama comes out and blows the doors off of Tennessee, and then close games either way. I wouldn't be like, it's one of those games where I can't even ballpark it because both teams are, going into it struggling so much. It's one of the things I asked Kalen DeBoer today was just like, how is it harder to scout a team when they're struggling? And he made sure to make sure he didn't give any bulletin board to Tennessee because he was like, he's just talking about like any opponent. And I was like, sure, any opponent. But I think you could say that about both teams. It's probably hard to scout Alabama right now because they're going to try to make a lot of corrections. And the same with Tennessee. It's hard to scout them. So it's just difficult. I would give Alabama by, 2 or 3 points. I haven't really thought about the overall prediction. I think it will probably be a defensive game. So probably, I guess, like if I'm just going to ballpark, I don't know if I'll stick to this with my prediction later on in the week, but I'll go like 27-24 Alabama. I could see that, but yeah, it's going to be close either way, or at least I think.
I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like if they play this game 10 times, I feel like we could have completely different results in all 10 games. Like it's just kind of which one ends up happening on Saturday.
The Hugh Freeze prediction.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I'm in the same boat as you though. Going into the season, I was like, I think Tennessee's going to get Alabama again at home. A new head coach in Kalen DeBoer. I thought it was going to be a good team, like you said, maybe 10-2, 11-1. But with Tennessee's improvement on defense and then what we all thought was going to be a really good offense, I thought this would be a game that Tennessee would be able to handle. And then kind of after that Florida game, I'm a little skittish on kind of putting any faith in Tennessee's offense. And I flipped it at least. You said maybe it'll change by the end of the week. I'm kind of the same way right now, where maybe on Friday I changed my mind. But as of now, I think it's a close game. I think it's relatively low scoring, and I think Alabama squeaks out a win. But that's just where we're at on a Monday afternoon. So there's a lot of prep and lead up to it.
I think I think Alabama has the better quarterback as of right now. I like that in the matchup. The only thing is I just saw how Heupel destroyed this defense and spread it out. And you look at all the struggles that Alabama's had on defense. And I'm just like, every time I kind of look at it, I'm like, okay, well, Jalen Miller could be a difference maker in this game. And he can kind of negate some of the pressure that Tennessee's going to get. And then I look at it and I'm like, how the hell is Alabama going to stop this Heupel? And I know it's not the same Tennessee offense. And but it's just the last time I saw it over there, it was just, they were just dominated, And so it's like, I look at it and I'm like, geez, it's tough. So I could, like I said, I could go a million different ways with it.
Yeah, and Heupel says he's like, it's not that far off from clicking and being the offense that we've seen the last few years. So if this is the game where maybe all of a sudden things start to click, then maybe it does go that way. But I do think it's kind of funny. I think Heupel might be the only coach in the country that obviously I think he was still probably a little happy he didn't have to play Nick Saban every year, but he kind of, all things considered, played Nick Saban pretty well all three. I mean, your first year in 21, you have a scrap of a team left from Pruitt, and you go to Tuscaloosa, and it's like a touchdown game in the fourth quarter. You win in 2022, and then if the things don't just fall off the rails in 23 for a Tennessee team that wasn't nearly as good as 22, they should have won in Tuscaloosa as well. So it's just kind of funny that Nick Saban or Heupel kind of played Saban pretty well, all things considered, all 3 years. And we'll have to see if that's something that continues to happen with the new coach, or if maybe Kalen DeBoer, who's familiar with Josh Heupel and the guys that know each other from South Dakota, if that kind of changes the dynamics of things a little.
The other thing I like from, I guess, an Alabama perspective is, like DeBoer keeps games close. And I think that's one of the differences between him and Saban. But on the other hand, like he wins these games. Like you go back and look at his record in rivalry games or in, close games or games against good coaches. And like he finds a way to win. And so he can get his team up for a big matchup and he can scheme pretty well for a big matchup. So that's another thing of, I guess to consider, of the many variables here, he is good in these games, and you got to give him, I guess, a little bit of the benefit of the doubt looking at recent history.
And we've seen Nico try to put together game-winning drives in the last 2 weeks, and neither one of them came up. And that's a tough spot to be in. I'm not going to act like you need to march down a field 90 yards every single time with 30 seconds on the clock and score a touchdown, but Tennessee's kind of 0 for 2 in those last second drives. And a lot of the close games we've seen Heupel coach in outside of Alabama 22, maybe the Florida 22, A&M last year, then Florida yesterday. But if you look at some of the other games that have been close, like that Arkansas game or some other ones in his tenure, it's the big wins are usually when he's up 60-20 and it's the fourth quarter. Those are more so the games that he wins when he gets off to those fast starts. When they get close, maybe it's not in his favor so much. That would be I should look into that now that I'm saying it out loud and kind of see what his record is in some of those closer games. But
well, if Lenore Sellers can drive down against this in a 2-minute offense against this Alabama defense, I think Nico should have the ability to do. Like, I think there's a difference in quarterbacks there. So hopefully, for the Vols fans' sake, he would do just as. Yeah, this might be the remedy for his game-winning drive.
And I should say, I don't put all of the blame on Nico for either of those drives. He made some nice throws in both of them. He hit Dante Thornton against Arkansas that kind of put him in a spot to win it. And then he had a really nice throw to Squirrel White on Saturday as well. But I digress. That's a perfect preview for the game, though. I'm excited for this Saturday. It's obviously been, like we said, circled since maybe 2022 when Alabama comes back to town. I know Tennessee fans are fired up for it. They get fired up for Florida, and I know that it's definitely going to be fired up for Alabama as well. It's kind of funny how the schedule works out this year where you get two of some of your biggest rivalry games back to back. Hopefully another kind of off the point topic, but hopefully in the future, the schedule works out with the SEC schedules that at least one of those two games is still yearly. Cause right now it wouldn't be
game. Yeah.
It would just be it would feel completely wrong to play college football season without Tennessee and Alabama playing. I think they've played every year since like World War II. So
yeah, it'd be tough. And I think Tennessee's going to be the team that gets like screwed out of that, right? Like what would be Tennessee's I think like from a rivalry standpoint, Tennessee, if everyone has one permanent rival, I think you look at it and like Tennessee gets maybe the easier route, but like, what do you get? Do you get Vanderbilt? I mean, does that
it would have to be Vanderbilt? And I think part of it too is you have to look at both sides of it. So it's like Vanderbilt has nobody but Tennessee. So you kind of have to pair the in-state matchup. And obviously you're not going to get rid of the Iron Bowl. Like I think even defense can admit that that's a bigger rivalry just because of the location and everything that goes with it. So personally, I'm hoping for the 9 game to get 6-3. Tennessee and Alabama would definitely be saved there. I don't think Tennessee and Florida would get saved in that. I think the other one for Tennessee would probably be Kentucky. And for Tennessee, that's probably good. You get Kentucky, Vandy, Alabama. I think that's probably a decent draw compared to what some of these teams would get. But yeah, I hope they figure it out that Tennessee and Alabama can play every year.
I would hate to lose this one. I didn't even like losing Alabama, Mississippi State. That's the closest 2 schools in the SEC, and that game has been going on for forever as well. And that's not even like a great game, but it's just like it's
the pageantry of it all and everything.
Yeah, it's just I'm losing the 3rd Saturday in October would be a crime. That's just like that'd be one of the worst things that could happen to college football, especially now that both teams are good. And for a while there, it was kind of getting to be like a throwaway rivalry, but now right
when it starts to heat back up, it's like, oh, by the way, maybe it won't be a yearly thing, but
you need it.
But we do need college football needs it. The fans on both sides need it. It would be a crime to get rid of it. You put it well. But that'll do it all from us here today on the VolReport Show. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you go check out Tony and what they do over at TideIllustrated.com. They do a great job. They have the best podcast name in the world. The Tide Pod is phenomenal. So I have to give credit to that. But if you want to know everything to know about Alabama, be the smartest guy at the tailgate, and know everything on the Crimson Tide side of things, head over at TideIllustrated.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.